why the American Bulldog for you?
So, American Bulldogs for me held pit bulls always held the ultimate appeal after owning a Rottweiler. Like I said, but being in Canada, coming to the harsh realization, I'm not going to get a good pit bull. By this point, like our whole province had adopted the law BSL. I said, let's, that young quest for the toughest dog led me, like I said, when I saw that ad and I saw a Twister and a standard American Bulldog, to me that was just, I needed that dog. So it was that lured me in, but then when I owned it, it was their ability. They were everything that what I heard a pit bull was without crazy dog aggression. So I quickly realized that's key. This is something special. This is a dog that is going to react. I was a young kid, and I had two very performance-style American Bulldogs and was into a very reckless life. And these dogs had many close calls and many times that they were forced to perform and without fail. So that to me, like I said, and then realizing that this is something pretty rare. This is something, it's not just Joe Blow's dogs that looked cool paired together and threw some cool looking dogs. I actually even lost my original pedigrees because to me at the time it didn't mean anything. I thought it was hilarious hearing my original mentor and breeder and the guys from Templar ramble off pedigree names to me. Okay, cool. Well, why are you telling me this? But I understand now. I understood quickly once I got into breeding. And then you understand that this breed is going to do anything for you. Well-bred, standard. I can't speak, and I don't want to be too critical on other bloodlines or programs, like type dogs. So if I sound opinionated, it's just coming from an unfiltered kind of place. I'll try to qualify. And like I said, I try to say when it's opinion. Things I've noticed, I wanted to maintain the standard bloodline. When I heard and seen the characteristics of the bullies and seen some of the unnecessary man aggression, that turned me off too. So that was kind of my main reason. I got to keep this purity. I got to keep these type dogs that were able to function innately with very minimal training. I'm cautious as much as I can be, and you're always going to make mistakes where when you give out ones, and people are going to dupe you. But this breed is extremely high performance, yet at the same time, they shouldn't be a liability. And I stress that there's other breeders and places that stress and preach that, but they can't prove that.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? It's a good theory. When I went to Rayburn's in Alabama, my first time, and I seen children running in between chain dogs that were unsocialized. When I brought the dogs from the Templar bloodline, my first colored stuff, when I brought them from the yard in Ohio where they were unsocialized, these dogs instantly were safe. I never had any worries. I probably took risks that maybe, would be, I would never tell other people to take. Like I took males to dog parks and stuff like that, which I would, chain dogs and stuff like that. I would never recommend, but luckily I see now by the grace of God, everything worked out. I would never suggest that. And but it's good to know these things. And it's good to see, like I said, I have a lot of my dogs that go to families that are first-time owners of Bulldogs. I don't necessarily think bragging about, user-friendly dogs can always be a good thing if your dogs can't be a bulldog. There was
Right.
there was a very wise, hard bulldogger who passed, Art Parker, who, if I quote it, his exact quote wrong, I'm sure it'll be corrected, or I can find out the exact quote he said. But he basically, to paraphrase it, he said wisely, and I mean, when I heard it too, I was like, man, that's awesome. That a bulldog should do, it's cool if a bulldog can do anything a shepherd can do, shih-tzu and chase a pillow and all that. He's like, but as long as it can be a bulldog first, that was the gist. I know I'm rephrasing it,
That makes sense.
not as Southern. And to me, Rayburn had said that, Jim had said that. All my Southern guys were not really into the whole protection or machismo thing.
How much of the American Bulldog do you think was influenced by Pit Bull at the end of the day?
I think a large amount. I can't speak. Like I said, I can't speak on a lot of the other lines, but I mean, anyone with a common sense and understanding of genetics will understand it plays a huge factor in even the bulliest lines of American Bulldog. Now, I know people are going to refute that and say no and whatever, and people look at pedigrees like they're the truest historical facts. People believe that the American Bulldogs came over with the Pilgrims and were like untouched. There's so many. That's what really started to turn me off. When I met Ray, I only dealt with, like I said, Rayburn and Jim Edwards. They're very close, very tight circle. And they were just honest about what was there. There was no fake, this is from here and there. Good, honest bulldogs. I never got any of these stories. And then I started hearing all these different stories and sales pitches with white English and stuff. And like I said, when I reemerged and started to connect with Rayburn, that was my whole, man, you were there since the beginning of the breed. I want to know it. I want to pick your brain. And I remember thinking, my brother and I are pretty unfiltered. There's a lot of stuff I know I asked Rayburn I probably shouldn't have. But with those style of dogs, pit bulls played a huge factor. And I'm sure you've watched the video that is out on the history of American Bulldogs where they interviewed Don and Alan in part one. And I mean, it was reintroduced again knowingly and recorded by John Lichhart, which Don also said, which formed the Black Line. And I'm not talking about, there's extremes in all examples of this. This is why I appreciate any working dog. Anything that can go down a hole, like a Yog or a good bred terrier, you know what I mean? Doesn't matter. I appreciate, or even like some of those Salukis that run in gazelles down. That's insane. But dogs that are forged in fire, whether it be boar hunting or in the box or whatever type of activity in the past, people have had to do to forge these dogs. So we look at pit bulls and we look at what these dogs. Of course, I'm only speaking on when things were legal or in countries where they are legal, or this activity is legal, and I don't endorse it. But I'm saying when we look at as far as an extreme being pushed to the limit, 2-3 hour match is about as pushed to the limit as the bodies can go. So it all comes down to being bred for the final product.
Sure.
Color doesn't play. That saying that they say the bull stops when the tailgate drops. That's what hog hunters say a lot, and that's the same thing. A lot of people have different phrases. It all gets settled in the box type deal. Well, we look at our example as a working breed and as the same sort of Now, pit bulls also excel in actual hog hunting, and catch dog events, of course, when they were legal. So different, big catch weight pits. So we look at them, and we look at, they're not the best records. They don't care. Can you imagine some fur mama coming up to someone with a grand champion and saying, "Excuse me, sir, your dog has a red nose. I don't know if you know the latest chatter online, but it's not really pure pit. It's not bred well. You know what I mean?
Right.
All that gets. And when we look at highest performance, nothing extra on a dog, perfect, elite, everything, the jaws, the construction of a pit bull, terrier, a game dog, and we look at an American Bulldog that's bred for working, in my opinion, they shouldn't be the same dog, but they should be very, very similar. Almost, they should have a lot of it. So when we go to that question, how much influence, there's distinct differences. And there's breeders who make their whole life focusing on just those, or the fact that yes, there is distinct differences, there should be. But we should always look to the American Pit Bull Terrier as one of the most important ancestors in this breed. Now, that being said, we can't have pit bulls. Otherwise, we have pit bulls. You know what I mean? So, game dogs that have too much dog aggression. This was one of the reasons I went to Rayburn and wanted that sort of old Southern White, or what they were. I wanted the fairy tale of what they were saying the old Southern White was too. And you know what? Rayburn put it. There is Southern White programs, and I know of breeders who have the truth. They have a family that's been pretty isolated of dogs, that they have a pretty recorded history. They're unpapered, or just kept on, whatever. There's a lot of truth to that. Of course they have to use outcrosses, and there's other stuff coming in. And they have a lower drive and all that, but there's a lot of fairy tale about, my old family had, this dog from, meanwhile, these are all just pound bully type mutts that you get at the pound, and you're breeding to each other, and you can't put papers on, so you're just making up, So I wanted the real deal, and I remember telling Rayburn, thinking this is the original guy, on one of my trips down there. I'm like, Rayburn, what's this whole thing with Southern White? And I mean, the timing was perfect. He brought me over to a dog on his yard, and I'll send you the picture. And he showed me, and he goes, "See?" He's like, I'm not going to say what other people, I'm not going to knock on, the other hustles or whatever interpretations. He's like, we always knew Southern Whites as around here, and I take that's where American Bulldogs started, and Rayburn and Allen and all those live very close. So anyway, he said a Southern White to them was always a white working bulldog that was on paper. They didn't know the exact lineage on. So it was like, I'm like I'm waiting. He stops. I'm like, that's it? Kind of like, I go, well, what about so that one? I'm like, what about that one? He's like, I'll bet you. He goes, I'll bet you that one has a lot of my blood. He's like, I know it, and I could see it. It looked basically a lot like a dog off his yard, like his bloodline. I couldn't, And he's like, there's other bulldog or stuff in it, because it was a few, multiple generations bred off his yard. They didn't really keep registering. He's like, so when he got that dog, it was unpapered. I don't think he bred it or whatever. He always had a soft spot for dogs, Rayburn. So he'd take care of some dogs, and he'd have different dogs as pets. And he also people will take old historic pictures and say, oh, he bred or he mixed other dogs. Rayburn had game dogs, and he had American Bulldogs. And he also, like I said, he had a soft spot. He took in dogs that needed places and gave them homes and stuff, patched them up and found places for them. So that being said, I think that was kind of the case with this dog. So I said, well, what about, these guys that he goes, well, if it would breed multiple generations, he goes, and you would advertise my dogs without papers as Southern White, technically are you lying? He's like, you're lying from what they're saying, but he's like, to me, that's what my understanding is. That's what we always call Southern Whites. The dog is, as long as it's producing itself, if the dog's throwing, all sorts of color and this and that, and it's throwing, you can tell it isn't a Bulldog, it wasn't a Southern White to them, and that's, as this breed evolved, our descriptions, our understanding, our explanations of stuff got so, you got to go to these Southerners sometimes for a reality check on how this breed started.
So would you agree then that maybe the American Pit Bull Terrier and the American Bulldog in the early days influenced each other?
Very much so, and I think the Spanish Elant was a huge part. That's why the Spanish Bulldogs, and if you look in Florida in some of those areas, the Cuban Bulldogs, where they would have that influence too, very similar. They were usually brindle, and you hear stories, and I have pictures of what they called Southern Whites, which are brindle Bulldogs too, from the South, Bulldogs. So talking also with my friends that are breeding Elants and hunting them out in Spain, a lot of them that are really big fans of they all came fans of the Stover dogs, and then kind of got really obsessed when they seen my Templar blood that I'm maintaining, which has a lot of color and reminds them of the Elants. And I remember that same night, that conversation with Rayburn about the Southern Whites, talking about the color, right? Because he knows what I did. I'm open and honest. Rayburn Stover is always been known, his white working Bulldogs, since the 70s, since before they were papered. He's known for all his famous dogs, all white. His breeding program is white working Bulldogs. They'll have eye patches, they'll have little patches. So, that being said, obviously that's his preference. That's also my preference for dogs. But I love and I appreciate what the color brings to the table. And I also realize that a paint job is a paint job on a dog. You can select pit bull characteristics, as I've seen not too long ago at a kennel, on white dogs. The same kennel had characteristics of Great Pyrenees because these dogs had double rear dew claws or rear dew claws. So just because they're white doesn't mean, and like I said, pit bull is a huge genetic. Elants are insert. All of this is an influence, but that means since we've been evolving since 1970 and moving onward, we should keep to that as a breed standard and stick within that. So it's for me to say, well, I'm going to select all my examples that are acting like pit bulls the most. My slimmest females, my gamiest ones, my dark ones only breed on my dark color, and the ones that have the highest drive, the ones that are the most dog aggressive, I'm going to select on that. I'm going to go multiple generations because that's what I like. Well, okay, cool. But you're kind of, the genotype is still American Bulldog. Their pedigrees are still American Bulldog, but you're breeding away from this, you're selecting away from the standard of what the breed's intended to be, and that can be done in any color. To me, people can do that and still stick within, the breed standard. To me, how good is it? Okay, you read the breed description of an American Bulldog, a farm utility catch dog, and then you see some of these Johnsons that get winded and they can't breed natural, and they can't, I don't mean I shouldn't say Johnsons, pardon me, some of these extreme bully examples. And I'm not knocking on, there's awesome extreme bullies. I'm not knocking on them. There's great bully dogs out there. I used one of my studs to a friend's dog who had a really awesome bully example. I mean, she could run, she could keep up. But that's why I say I speak from, knowing these. I don't just speak from a place of seeing it and not liking it because it looks a certain way. But to me, that dog going to be able to perform your average. If I breed only dogs with pushed in snouts, extremely bulky, all of this. Are they going to be able to work around a farm? Are they going to be able to perform in this, like what the description of the breed says? So once again, that's selecting away from, just like as if I'd select to be exactly game dog, because game dogs are the biggest kind of, in my opinion, influence, or what they should be on the standard. You know what I mean?
Sure.
American Bulldog. So that being said, it's all with this breed being since 1970. It's still very important, selection being the key too, right?
Right.
So, if that helps in my...
But in your opinion, when it comes to the American Bulldog, would you say that the different color patterns came from pit bulls?
I'd say for sure in certain examples, yes, 100%. John Lichhart did a cross with, I don't want to, he's accredited for it, and there's actually some other guys who did it also. A gentleman, I forget his first name, Weaver, and there was another gentleman, the name's slipping, there's other gentlemen who were involved in this breeding. Anyhow, Don Matthews ended up with some of that blood, so that was done in the 90s, I believe 96. We can touch base. A lot of people will probably correct, but we can touch base on that. I just have to look it up. I have it all written down.
Sure.
Like I said, it's all in your head, and just like pedigrees are all in your head when you don't need them. But nonetheless, so they recorded a breeding between a Boudreaux dog with a performance type American Bulldog. So that was recorded, and now this is the theory now of why some of these haters with the color think that because of these selections and because of people possibly, the rumors with everything, or they're adding stuff that they're not papering and use, whatever the case, or the latest rumors you can't keep up with anymore, that are going to hate because of that pit bull cross. I say to them, that was 1996, I believe. Like I said, I'll have to double check. We're not using game dogs. So that breeding, the outcome, I believe was Jedi, was one of the dogs produced from that. I can't remember some of the other names. But anyhow, unless you are breeding so heavily like a game dog's yard, like a dogman's yard that has his own blood of game dogs, unless you're breeding like that on that dog, then yeah, I would say you got it. That comes into play, and you're using pit bull and all sorts of stuff. But like people that are going to say a black dog is a pit bull because it's black, I don't even really know what to say with that. I think once again it gets back to selection. I can select really in my own breeding program. I can select some really calm colored dogs. I can breed them to very calm other color or white dogs, because there's a slight variation. There's two bloodlines I'm kind of working with, which I've blended now. But there's variation is slight. The phenotypes are almost identical. But that's why I like to keep that slight variation. But if I would select on the individuals that would be, on the lower end scale in the color, I could have the exact opposite of everything people are preaching, just a paint job. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I could select. I had a litter last year on Christmas out of a white female. It's a lot of Stover blood behind her, which, as I was saying, is predominantly white. The male is a buckskin brindle red, a buckskin reddish male, which is, once again, the color comes from my other bloodline, Templar, and the dogs behind them that had color. So when I bred those two, there was 14 pups, and half was color, half were white. Now, when you cross like a Rottweiler to a pit bull, you kind of get blends between the two, and there's like weird, wildly inconsistent. You might get one that looks like a and one possibly that looks like a pit bull, but not bang on. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
But like you get most that are a blend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I breed, I'm getting exact clones, almost all white, like my Stover dogs. Bang on clones. The white ones are what? There's no patchwork. There's no heavy saddling. There's no full body. There's no. And my brindles are brindle, exactly like the dogs from their pedigree, the Templar stuff. You know what I mean? And like I said, there's a lot of the people that will say, "Oh, these colored dogs are pit bulls." I've owned both since, I've had those dogs both white and color since since the end of the later 90s. So I can speak from experience of numerous color dogs I've brought in that were very raw chain dogs, kennel dogs. Same with dogs from Rayburn that are from the white program. There was, people say, like I said, with white dogs being, and Rayburn had one of the oldest, and in my opinion, one of the purest breeding programs, because he started in 1970 and he never really used outside too much, and he just kept going until he basically passed, and now a few people are still carrying on his dogs. So if anything would be as kind of, what you would want to say is true to the pure American Bulldog working, as they come, it would kind of, as far as definition, be Stover dogs, right? So when I look at, like I said, my own dogs that came from Rayburn himself, selected from him. It's not like these are dogs selected or bred by other people that have a few shots of this breeder's bloodline in it. I can say from experience, it's not all on paint job. It's selection on temperament. When we're that close back, it's all the same.
So with that being said, would you say that the White English and the Old Southern are one and the same?
I'd say the people that are honest and describe their variations of their family program, if they're honest, and I know quite a few of them now, because I teamed up for a little bit with a guy who was a staunch hater of the White English. He thought everyone that used that, bred that, was a snake oil salesman, peddler. Oh, how come they all come with the Southern? And he had some true points. Like I said, there is people that jump on the Southern Whites, but those ones, as far as honest people that say, hey, there's a difference in this, I believe that. I believe, and I've seen it myself as far as the prey driving goes, as far as like the White English and some of them being more suitable for livestock. But once again, the reason we see that is because it's selection, right?
So you would call them two different breeds then?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Because that's what. And the reason I say that is because that's what they want to. If they would want to call it, there's bloodlines within American Bulldogs, even within standard, that will act as different as a Southern White and an Old English or whatever White English Bulldog or whatever. There's quite a few different Old Southern Whites. They say there's they're generally, I don't know the exact differences between the two. As far as which one is better for farm, lower prey drive and better around farm animals and so forth, and which ones of them are, some of them are used for hog hunting and stuff like that. I know, like I said, the guys I grew up looking up to, like Rayburn and those guys, and like even seeing the Dorseys, which had some dogs. They have a hunting lodge. They're pretty well known. And they had bulldogs that kind of were like more, they weren't as, they were hog dogs. They were working hog dogs. They papered them as, Southern White or Southern Bulldogs. It is what it is. It's a working dog. Who cares about the history? The job that gets done, right? They're open and honest about it being what it is, a functioning bulldog, I always get suspicion, any breeder or any people that are going to be so obsessed about pedigrees, 30 years old or 20 years old or however if you're chances are you either got a lot to hide. More than likely, if you're a breeder, a well-known breeder, if that's what you're always peddling in, you got a lot to hide, and you're trying to keep it, or like these just losers that are like antisocial type people that are living online and wanting to just get into whatever drama. It's like all of that's irrelevant. What's so far back? If people are open and honest about what they're breeding, what they're working with, they pick people that are open and honest, that have the same mindset. All of that stuff about origins and labels, I think, kind of gets sorted. It gets thrown out in the, that's the way I kind of have looked at it.